let's put you in a new role in life. You're the Chief Compliance and Risk Management Officer for Silicon Valley. And actually, I'll expand that role if you'd like to have an even broader set of responsibilities, and that is for all of our investors at the Motley Fool. All of us as investors, you're now our Chief Compliance and Risk Officer because you've spent the time to study the most recent, most significant collapse.
So what are the holes that allow this train wreck to happen? What are that's mixing metaphors, but it's one of them is that a lot of the big accounting firms wouldn't audit crypto. So you already had, not that the big accounting firms aren't capable of presiding over a disaster, but you already had a situation as a Silicon Valley investor where you're looking at firms that are not conventionally audited. They might have some little auditor you've never heard of if they have one, or they might just sketch out their balance sheets like a third grader on a piece of paper and fax it to you. In retrospect, wasn't obvious in the moment, right? Because 120 people invested in it, but if you go back, you say what should have flagged. We have flagged is just like we're not going there. Well, I would say no board of directors is a pretty good sign that there's a problem. That if there's absolutely no one else who knows what's going on inside the business, added to no CFO, added to no organization chart, like you can't actually know who works.
That was a pretty telling moment in Go Infinite when SBF simply asked, "Why would I have a CFO?"
Why would I have a CFO and actively hostile to organization charts and lists of employees? The fact that this, you have the book there, right? Mm-hmm. If you take the jacket off, take the jacket off the book. If you take the jacket off the book, and just hold it up, the look on the inside of the jacket, and Sam, because there's so many emotional problems and psychological problems in the company. So the inside of the jacket, right. So that is the only organization chart known to exist for FTX, and it was created by the company psychiatrist. And it was Sam's and Caroline's personal psychiatrist, who they moved to the Bahamas to deal with all the unhappiness in the company. And the shrink can't get his mind around the problems people have unless he knows where they are in the organization. So in therapy, he starts to tease that out, and he creates the only organization chart, sticks it on a thumb drive and gives it to me, and he vanishes. But Sam didn't know that existed. So you're asking for compliance. So those three things are kind of tells. You know what else is a tell? It's this fear of, and I don't know what to say about this exactly. So if you're a venture capitalist, your biggest fear is not that Sam Bankman-Fried takes your money and you lose $30 million. It's that FTX is the next $1 trillion company and you weren't there. And it's that's the calculation they're all making, is that this thing looks like a rocket ship. It's gone from, it actually has gone in revenues from 20 to 100 to 950 to $1 billion. And the revenues are going to be a byproduct of, like, how many people want to gamble in this casino. And the VCs I talked to, and I interviewed them before everything went bad and after. Before it went bad, they said they thought Sam might be the world's first trillionaire. So they're thinking like that. Now, whether that's right or not, they're thinking that scale. And so what I would say is, compliance officer, whenever you come to me with a fear of missing out story, and it's just like, we got to do this because it's going to be, that's where you got to be the most.
Let's see if they have a board.
Yes, let's see this.
Let's just see if they have a board. It is funny. It is funny. We had meetings with a venture capitalist in San Francisco when we took our learning and development group at the Motley Fool to meet a bunch of companies in San Francisco when they graduated the program, and one of them presented the challenge that they had faced at the firm, which is that they had decided to take the next incoming group of analysts and teach them about the mistakes that had been made in terms of the losers. They went through a whole process, and they were like, it would be great just to remove a few of these. And that analyst group ended up having the worst performance because they did remove the most losers, and they removed the one Tesla or the one Airbnb, and the math crushes you if you do that. So they went back and said, we are now training our analysts to make mistakes, to keep going as boldly as possible, and that does open the door on investing in something, a business that doesn't have a board or a CFO and ends up being a total collapse.
Yeah, and it was also, this is also a story of the lure of crypto, right? That what got me interested in this in the first place was not like Bitcoin. I was kind of like assaulted by crypto people for 10 years to try to write a book about them, and I never could get that interested. But when all of a sudden the market cap of cryptocurrency is at $2 trillion, you're looking and you're thinking like, this is getting to the size where this is going to have social consequences. That it isn't just like, a funny little gambling sideshow. And so the VCs are looking like, how do we get into this? Because it got so big. And you can't really blame them, although you can sort of ask them like why you didn't insist on some insight into the business. But if you had insisted, you would have been left out. You know, I mean, it's but so you're saying I'm the compliance officer? I would just say those are the moments where you were actually at the biggest risk of doing something dumb. It's that, oh, I got to be there. I got to be at that part.
We had a wonderful conversation with a professor at NYU Business School named Dr. Melissa Schilling, and she was talking about a book, Quirky, that she's written, and really assessing the patterns of the great founder leaders of companies, I think not entirely companies, innovators, and the changes that they drove. And she was identifying that they often wouldn't probably be high on the list of EQ. They might have been very high IQ, but they didn't do a good job of collaborative work efforts and building consensus because they were separate from the group, and they were thinking differently, and they didn't have a filter to understand how they were being perceived by others. And so I'd like to hear from you a little bit of the SBF balance of IQ, EQ, and how you think about that, how we evaluate leaders and what we should be looking for, knowing that neither one, or an emphasis on neither one, is going to automatically give you one winner after the other. But how should we, in evaluating leaders of private or public companies that we invest in, evaluate somebody along the continuum of EQ and IQ?
Well, in the case of Sam Bankman-Fried, he defines one end of the continuum, right? This is a totally socially isolated kid who knows he doesn't feel empathy or pleasure and is unable to make facial expressions until he's 20 years old, and does not feel your pain, and knows it, like born with these qualities. And people around him are always compensating for the fallout from his lack of interest in your emotional state and lack of sense of emotional intelligence. Nishad, who just finished testifying, Nishad Singh, who just finished testifying against him, said to me once, back when things were good, he said, my job here has been to be Sam's emotional intelligence because he doesn't have any. But I've watched him, he was kind of patting him on the back saying, in the last 6 months, he's subcontracted some of his IQ to use it as EQ, and he's gotten a little better. But I think that to answer the second part of the question is like how you take that into account when you're evaluating someone who's doing something, creating a business. I mean, you can't create an organization of people without keen emotional intelligence. It's going to survive. It may be the person who creates the organization doesn't supply that, but the absence of it should be something that puts you on red alert, I think. And I thought, one of the ways I saw this story right from the beginning was, this is what happens when you exalt a certain kind of intelligence and pay no attention to other kinds of intelligence. And they're constantly talking about they're only interested in really high IQ people. They're really only interested in people who are kind of mathy, sciencey. They don't really. Sam, like at age 7, begins to think anything in the humanities is all bullshit. Makes arguments how Shakespeare is an idiot. It's that kind of thing that this isn't smart. This is a blind spot. It's a blind spot that you need to compensate for.
It probably ends up being ultimately more about evaluating the full team. And if everyone starts anchoring at one end of that continuum, or any particular skill becomes so emphasized in an organization that the other side isn't represented, you start to get imbalance and blind spots emerge potentially all over the place. Michael, if you were to testify, do you think you would be helpful to the prosecution or the defense?
Probably the prosecution. Because what gets into a courtroom is pretty sterile. Like, you're not allowed to introduce context, emotion, feeling, all that stuff, really. And the facts the sort of the facts of the book that would find their way into the court all would just be damning. I could list them, but at this point, I don't think the prosecution needs a lot of help. And also at this point, it's funny, lawyers, they don't like uncertainty. And I think what I'd really be is a little ball of uncertainty, that I would create a kind of odd climate in a courtroom, and I don't expect to be asked to testify.